Hello, everyone. My name is Mike Sheila. I am the Director of Marketing and Business Development for Advantage Industries. And I want to welcome you all to this brand new series that we are kicking off here in October of 2021, where we're going to sit down with industry experts to not only talk about their company, but also their industry, what's going on in their industry, what are the trends they're seeing, and how they're using technology to really impact positively for their customers. And all of the people that you are going to see in this interview series are Advantage Industries customers. And gosh, we couldn't think of a better one to start with than Waldon Studios. And Krista Kerrigan is the director of business development for the organization. She's also a principal in the organization. We were just discussing, she has been with them now for over 10 years. And she said to me, we have been working with Advantage as long as I have been here. So Krista Kerrigan, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, thank you for having me.
I love to start with what I call the nuts and the bolts, meaning who is Waldon Studios? Where are you located? Who do you serve? What are your specialties? So let's start with Waldon Studios from a high level, and then we'll start to get really specific in a few things that you find interesting.
Sure, yeah, thank you. My name is Krista Kerrigan. I am one of the principals here and partners of the firm with our president and founder, Ravi Waldon, who started the company now, I think about 18 years ago. So hence the name Waldon Studio Architects. And we were founded really to serve and strengthen the community through design. I feel like it is our calling to create and serve and elevate our clients' mission and vision and purpose for being here. So if our architecture can do that for them, then we've been a success, and that would answer our why for doing what we do. We have been very blessed to serve many different industries. We started off really serving a lot of clients in the worship sector, faith-based architecture, as well as community centers and schools, kind of community-centric architecture. Nonprofits included in that. But from there, we've actually expanded since I've been here into serving healthcare clients, serving the multifamily mixed-use housing industry, hospitality. We also do interiors and historic preservation. So we serve a real wide range of clients, but still with that same mission to serve, come with a servant heart, and really fulfill the project for our clients' needs and not for our own architectural fulfillment, right? The project shouldn't look like us, it should look like them in the end. And so we have been in our location of Columbia, Maryland since the beginning, but we also have offices in Baltimore and Washington, D.C.
Wonderful. Now, that sounds to me like a mid-Atlantic focused marketplace for you. Is that where your customers are coming from?
You bet. Yeah. And it varies depending on the sector and the client type that we're serving. But we actually have done work in about 29 states across the country,
Oh, wow.
primarily
Okay.
on the eastern half of the country. But a large focus of our work is within the mid-Atlantic region. So Maryland, Virginia, DC, some Delaware, Pennsylvania, Virginia. That's kind of the main region that we serve.
Wonderful. Now, I'm in the IT industry, and your industry, like mine, that word, people make assumptions about what it means. What does IT mean? And people make assumptions what architecture means. It's such a broad statement. So for our audience, talk a little bit about what architecture means specifically for Walden, for your customers.
Sure. Yeah, that's such a deep question. I could I could
We could
spend
spend the whole hour on it,
most of
right?
the interview on that. Yeah. Yeah, but no, what an interesting question. So for some people they think of, oh, you must do a lot of art and drawing, be really good with making pretty pictures. For others, they think we must be really good at math and engineering, and it's really a true blend of both. But for us, it is about, much like you do at Advantage, and you do a wonderful job of this, it's really about serving your specific client and their specific needs. So no two projects are ever going to be the same. To my chagrin, I feel like I can never really master this industry ever that anyone can, because every project is so different and technology is evolving, and we want to remain innovative in everything that we do. But with the main goal being that when our clients finally get to occupy their new space or renovated building, whatever it is, that they say, this is exactly what I was hoping for and more, and that it really continues to function for them throughout the life of the space, or as long as the materials and building holds up, right? So for us, that it's such a wonderful blend of art and function and technology and engineering. We usually have on most of our teams, no less than 3 or 4 or 5 other consultants. We've worked on projects as large as having a team 30 different companies working on larger projects together. So it's really a collaboration, and for us, ensuring that the project meets the needs that were defined as the owner, but also that we might have been able to expand their vision for what they could be, and elevate their purpose and give them something even more than what they had imagined. That is always our goal.
So earlier you were talking about who your clients are, and yes, a broad base, but I heard three specific industries, if you will, come up. I heard nonprofit, I heard education,
Mhm,
and I heard faith-based.
mhm.
So for education, I would think that public and private probably have their own nuances to them. And nonprofits can be as nuanced as each individual one. They're quite literally snowflakes. And I think you could also say that in the faith-based sector, if you're meeting with a Catholic church as opposed to a Jewish temple, as opposed to a Muslim mosque, as opposed to a Baptist church or a Methodist church, that there may be some commonalities in that, but I would think that the word for your organization is diversity and a richness of design.
Yes, absolutely. That's an interesting take on things. I appreciate your perspective on that, and you're absolutely right. So it's interesting because a lot of times designing spaces, there's a lot in common with um, a gymnasium or multi-purpose space for a church that is very similar to what a school might need, or another client type. You can design for flexibility and adaptability in a lot of similar ways in materials and lighting and furniture and functionality. But the way that we serve clients can be very different in terms of how we might be educating them and other decision makers as we go, and how we could be accommodating different specialty needs. So, for example, with our schools, making sure that our spaces really serve the needs of 21st century learning, project-based learning, collaboration, communication, multiple methods of learning, multiple teaching walls, virtual learning, all of those types of things in a classroom, and ensuring that we understand how their funding sources work and when the designs need to be completed. A school year starts and stops on very definitive dates. Those construction
Yes.
projects have to be completed no matter what, right? We put the same attention into a schedule for a worship facility or a housing project, but their needs are very different. We might be presenting to an entire congregation at a church. We might be doing, for any of our project types, we might be doing town hall meetings to help share about the project and answer any questions. We might be meeting with small groups and stakeholders and individuals to talk about very specific details of their rooms and how they're going to function. So for us, that's really where it's important that we can bring a lot of value to our clients in the way that we can flex to meet their needs and the needs of their organization. So we know a lot and we consider ourselves to be experts in design, and yet it's how we're actually working with our clients that kind of sets us apart and makes us different and gives added value to them for their project, and allows for the project to be a success in the end.
I want to pull out two words that I heard you say because I think they're so critical to business success, particularly in this COVID midst world, which is flexibility and education. And when I say education, I mean specifically educating our customers, because from our perspective, we do what we do every day. We live it. You mentioned you've been with Walden now for over 12 years. I have been in this industry now since 1999. It's how I see the world. It's how I vision the world. And when I talk to a prospective client, it's critical that I take that step back and I don't assume that they understand what something means. That I don't assume that they know an industry jargon, and to check in with the client frequently and say, are you familiar with this? And if not, let me tell you why I'm bringing it up, and equally important, why I think it matters to your project. So talk a little bit more about flexibility in education, because I'm guessing that's a daily ritual for you and your clients.
Yeah, no, that is really interesting. So for example, our worship facility clients, they struggle often with getting millennials to come to church or be interested in faith, and they might be on their own faith journey. And we have done research and given presentations and topics on what millennials say they are drawn to, and that could be um, a sense of calm, a connection to nature, very clear, definitive symbolism or wayfinding within a facility. They may have never been to a church before, for example, or something
Yeah,
along
absolutely.
those lines. And we can give presentations on research and data that might help facilitate them meeting their goals of welcoming a younger generation to their facility and how design can foster that. With a education client, for example, you're absolutely right. That something like virtual learning is really, really important. And with the pandemic, other building technologies and fresh air intake and health and wellness, well design in facilities are really important. But the way that one of our clients, for example, Prince George's County Public Schools, is dealing with that might be very different than Baltimore City Public Schools or Baltimore
Oh,
County,
absolutely.
Anne Arundel
Yeah, great
County.
points.
And so we say, well, here's what we have done at other facilities and what we've thought about, but there's also another way to tackle this. How do you guys look at this? How do you guys think what are your initiatives that you're trying to fulfill? And how can we fit in with that? So we can bring, like you're saying, all of these examples, all of these ideas, how we've seen it work. We've actually connected like one school district with another to say, oh, you should really talk to so-and-so at this district. They're dealing with the same thing, but they've developed this wonderful specification for security in their vestibules, or for their virtual learning classroom. We just did a test fit for them. Let me show you. And we can actually also help educate by bringing clients together that are dealing with the same issues, and that's been very successful as well.
Yeah, and so you just brought up two more amazing points that I want to go into just a little bit deeper. The first was when you were talking particularly about the challenges that a faith-based community might be facing, that the architecture almost becomes part of the marketing. That you're adapting, the aesthetic becomes the overall appeal, and understanding, well, why are we building this building? Are we simply building it because the old facility is now past its prime? Are we renovating? Are we trying to not only reinvigorate our building, but are we trying to reinvigorate our community? So I thought that was interesting. So why don't you take a moment and talk a little bit more about that? 'Cause, I mean, you and I are both sales professionals, so it's almost natural that we would see the world that way. But I find I don't know that everybody listening necessarily thinks of their architecture from a marketing perspective, which I think is brilliant.
Yes, you're exactly spot on. And it's true for all of our industries. It's interesting. Most people, some people might not think that a church does marketing. That might think like that's an odd
Talk to
thing.
John Maxwell; he'll tell you otherwise.
Well, it's difficult to share the message if you don't have the community to share it to, right? But no, it's very true for our healthcare projects with hospitals, and that the lobby and the feel of the spaces that are serving the patients is so critical in them feeling at home and feeling comfortable and safe and well, and want to come back and engage continue to engage with that healthcare institution or organization. It's the same for our residential spaces, that feeling, the lobby, the natural light, the views, the way that the spaces are organized, that when someone comes to that building, they say, I want to live here. That is really important. It's the same for our faith-based facilities, where
I want to be
they're
part of this community. Wow. Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly. And so what's interesting too is that we're seeing a lot of hybrid projects, where we actually have faith-based housing developments. We have churches that want to serve their community and give back and build low-income housing, for example, because they feel like that's what their community needs. That's what they need to do to help serve their community. So we'll do a housing project for a worship facility that can serve the neighbor, or a community center, sports and rec. We have a wonderful project called the DC Dream Center for National Community Church in DC. And it's really indoor basketball court, yoga, dance facility, offices, community meeting space, art, everything that they realize their neighborhood and the children of their community need. So it might not be a church, but it's them fulfilling the need. And in turn, you asked about marketing. It's more of how can they get their message out? How
Yeah.
can they help serve best, right? That is what
What's
marketing
their brand
is.
identity and how does it fit in with the aesthetics that you're designing?
You bet. Absolutely.
And so, with that, the other thing that you mentioned, and for our audience, Krista and I frequently email each other about a whole host of things that are not necessarily related to the conversation today because we're both sales professionals. So we try to open doors for one another and we try to make introductions for one another. And I've done some work with her team to show them. And we have a very good back and forth relationship. And I think that's something that a lot of organizations don't necessarily count on when they choose an IT company, when they choose an architect vendor. You mentioned bringing two counties together so that they could have a peer-to-peer advisory conversation. I have a dozen different stories about that over the last couple of years. I think my favorite is I met a gentleman a week before Thanksgiving in 2019. So this is really going back. And we met for breakfast one morning. We had a great conversation. He and I had 5 or 6 subsequent conversations about coming to work with us. And it, as so often the case, the client went cold. I didn't hear from him for several weeks. And I reached out to him one day and said, hey, is anything that we can help with? And he emailed me back and said, look, I'm having real problems with my firewall. And until I get that straightened out, I can't do anything else. And I said, Craig, that's literally what we do. Let's talk. Let me try and help you. And what I ended up finding out was that they had bought a cloud-based firewall for their business, and they were having trouble interacting with the vendor. The vendor was just giving them the cold shoulder. So I went out to my network and I said, "Hey guys, I've got a client here that has a fill in the blank firewall. I'm not going to throw anybody under the bus." And they were having trouble getting that interaction. And we found a certified business partner for that vendor and we got them fixed. And I think that's so important because I didn't make a dime off of that transaction, but that is the connection that Waldon is making with their clients. That's the collaboration that they're hoping to achieve. At least that's what I've heard from your words.
Yeah, that's a great example. And Advantage Industries has actually helped us do something similar. We have a relationship with a wonderful private school client in Maryland, and we've never actually done any work for them, but we've stayed in touch with them. And they had a group of students, wonderful, intelligent, creative students that are looking to figure out what they want to do after high school. They've got a couple years out, and this particular group was interested in architecture, engineering, and IT. Russell Smith from Advantage Industries and myself served on a
My
panel.
engineer extraordinaire.
We served on a panel to share with them what both of our worlds are like, what the architecture industry and engineering construction and what IT is like. We gave examples. We, tried to connect and relate to where they might be and our paths and share their experience. And, Advantage has never worked with this organization either. We just both jumped in and said, we'd love to help, let's share what we know to help the students in this generation. And so that's what I love about you guys and working with you guys. You're always willing to foster that type of communication and build relationships and henceforth somehow business comes out of that, but that might
Yes.
not be the driver, right? That's not
Yes.
always our intention.
Yeah, and that's my favorite part of the job. So let's take a step back because we've talked a lot about Walden, and I love the story that you're telling. But let's talk bigger picture about the architecture industry because I'm just going to say it. I know COVID's impacted everybody that's watching this presentation today. And I got a great piece of insight that the ordinary companies are complaining, I can't find clients, I don't have enough money, revenue's tight. But the extraordinary companies are investing and they're strategically spending more money. And because of that, they're seeing the growth that they wanted to see. So, from your perspective, as a leader in the architecture industry here in the Mid-Atlantic marketplace, what are the big picture trends that are impacting your industry?
Yeah, so the biggest glaring one that's happening right now is um, changes in the supply chain and
Yeah.
the cost increases that we've seen. It's across every industry, and even
Mhm.
people are talking about it for the holiday season. Buy your gifts early because they might not be available. Right, it might affect every single thing that we
Don't
touch.
wait until December 20th. You'll be out of luck, even with 2-day
Right.
shipping.
Exactly, yeah. But for us in particular, lumber, wood, even things like plywood, the
Sure.
prices have skyrocketed, especially from the residential housing boom that kind of has followed right as we start to recover from the pandemic. And so just things like that, steel, getting steel for our buildings, the cost has gone up, but the longer lead times. So we are seeing, clients just have a lot of questions about, can my project still get built? Can it still build to the budget that we had planned? What can we do? We're working with contractors a lot on product substitutions. Well, we can't get this, but we can get this. It's equivalent. It will hold up the same. We are just trying to all like flex very quickly to meet the needs of our clients in a changing market, and it's difficult because it's unpredictable. We don't really know when things are going to change. So you'll have clients asking, can we wait 6 months and will this have, rectified itself or, come back? We don't really know right now. And I wish we had more answers to that. But so that's the biggest thing. I think the other thing is just the way that we work together and the way that we meet and the way that we collaborate. Technology has fostered that and changed things a lot. And obviously in your industry, you're seeing that the most. um,
Yes.
Yes, yeah. And so making sure that we can still have a connection to our clients and serve them well from afar and virtually, as everyone is facing in this industry, but also demonstrate, our design capabilities with 3D modeling and renderings and imagery to help them still fully understand the design and the space and communicate clearly with technology has been really important. And then in the way that we collaborate with all of our consultants, structural, civil, mechanical, plumbing, electrical engineers, we all share 3D models and work together on those, and technology is critical. Cloud-based technology in particular is critical. So we don't draw a lot on paper as we work our way through construction documentation, and so we can't function without our technology at all. um, well, almost at all. Um, so those are probably the biggest things right now that are happening. And then with every client type, it's different, as we talked about with schools, virtual learning, and how that affects the classroom and the school space, and how big are you even how big are you supposed to build a classroom now, and how do you
Because that answer has
accommodate.
changed
It
significantly.
continues to change, yeah. How does it affect the funding for projects? How does it affect public spaces in worship facilities or community centers and sports and rec centers? How do we keep people safe? Um, Healthcare, especially the healthcare market. How are we accommodating this huge flexibility and the need for adaptability within spaces where a COVID unit might be full, might be overflowing, and then might be half full. And then, how are we accommodating other space within the same building to serve multiple functions? All of that has come into play. So it's just, yeah, it's very, everything is in flux quickly, and being able to adapt and adjust quickly is really important.
Yeah, I want to highlight one thing that you said because I think it's across the board for business professionals, because I know I've certainly seen it in my industry, is if getting something, whether that's a computer or plywood, whichever, used to take a month,
Mhm,
it now probably takes 3 to 6 months.
mhm,
And that's frustrating.
mhm,
And what business owners need to think about is something that we talk with your organization all the time, which is road mapping. What does your company want to look like in 12 months? What do you want to look like in 24 months? Because once we know that, once you know that, the earlier that you can talk to a client that has an architecture need, the better. Because you can always slow things down. It's kind of hard to speed them up.
mhm.
And I think that's a key takeaway for our audience today is if something's on your mind for your business, however long you think it's going to take, conservatively double that and then talk to an industry professional to really get a timeline to what do things look like now. Because if we know we want it in April, on a scale of 1 to 10, how realistic is meeting that April deadline? And you know as well as I do that it's not a one size fits all answer. It's what is the project, what is the scope, what is the budget? Budget can play a heavy factor in timelines as well. So that was a big takeaway from what you just said, and I think our audience can benefit not just for if they have an architecture project, not if they just have an IT project, but anything that they're considering for their business is talk to your vendors now. If it's on your mind, talk to them now. Say, look, I might not do this for 6 months, because more often than not, your vendor's going to go, well, 6 months is about right. So if you're serious about 6 months, let's start talking today. Let's start laying out an outline, seeing what this is going to look like, seeing what the pricing's like, what are the project milestones, and all those talking points that we have to get through so that we assure that you as the customer are really pleased with the outcome,
Mhm.
because that's what matters. That's what drives your success. That's what drives mine. And frankly, our satisfaction, because it's not enough just to bring the client on, but you want that client to be a billboard for you and
Mhm.
say, I worked with Waldon Studios. What a tremendously positive experience from Krista all the way down to the person that answers the phone and everybody in between. That's what you want your clients to be saying. And the more that we can educate a potential client about being in front and being proactive, the happier everybody is in the process. So I love that. I think that's great. So let's transition a little bit. Technology is kind of big in your industry. And my aforementioned engineer extraordinaire Russell Smith, he gave me some great talking points with you, and something interesting that probably most people don't think about when they think about the architecture industry is the conversation of cloud versus premise-based servers. What should be in the cloud? What should be in that local server in your office? When do you move things to cloud? And I'll set this table by saying that your average file is 10 times larger than the average file of almost every other industry. So that impacts so many things. So with that table set, talk a little bit about, we'll start with cloud versus on-premise work for your business, and then we'll expand to a few other things that are relevant to the architecture industry as well.
Sure, yeah, yeah. And it kind of does dovetail into what you were just talking about. We tend to be a very optimistic business organization, which means that we pretty much, despite all of the craziness in the market right now, we pretty much say there is a way. to accomplish what you need. We will figure it out. So if we need to go to a multi-phased solution, we need to break out your project into different bid packages. We need to get the ball rolling by this date. We can do that still, and here's how. We'll make product substitutions to fulfill the things that are long lead items, or what can you wait on? Let's flex, let's change the way this skylight works to get this different type of glass because we know we can get the window, whatever it is, we'll figure it out. We kind of believe that in our lives and in our business practice and how we serve our clients. And it's kind of the same in working with you guys and working with our technology, and I think this is probably common across multiple industries, but like, we need to access all of our files of all sizes from every geographic location and from every device all the time. So figure that out. How do you facilitate that? Right. So we, because of that, we do have very, very large file sizes. A lot of our projects going with a cloud-based solution is helpful for that. As I mentioned, we will have many, many people working on the same project and in the same 3D model at the same time live, so that you can refresh and see the changes of a colleague that's sitting at a desk next to you, or that's working from home, or working in an engineering office across the country. You can see their changes all at once, and you can be working together, at the same time. So that's really important, but having the bandwidth to facilitate that is important. And half our employees work from
bandwidth, you mean literally bandwidth?
Literally the bandwidth. And we have half of our employees working from home half the time, working from the office half the time, and they're not all doing it at the same time in the same location. And so just being able to have technology that facilitates all of that flexibility has been critical. So just an example, I know that I can access these huge, we call it Revit is the program we use, Revit files from my laptop here. I can remote into another workstation if I need a bigger, better computer. I can do that from my laptop here. I can do that from home. I can go to that other bigger, better workstation, and I can work at the same time as all of my fellow employees on the same project without really any major hiccups or glitches, but also everyone else that we collaborate with. And Advantage Industries has facilitated all of that for us, and how it is set up for every single employee. So there is not, I think the critical thing is that, like, there is not downtime in waiting or needing someone to come into the office or getting a project done. So it's no secret that you guys know this, we might be working late hours. We might be working on the weekends. We have a lot of project deadlines. So we cannot have the downtime. We cannot have a technology fail, in that, when we have those deadlines. And so having a system that is set up to accommodate all of those needs and flex no matter where the person is and what computer or device they're using has been critical. So I don't know if that really, answers your question or touches on that, but for us, that's the biggest part.
Well, I love what you said there, because it gives me the opportunity to outline the design of what that looks like. So the example you just gave, you have an office, a working business office. You have your remote employees, and sometimes you're one of those, and sometimes you're in the office. And then you have your data center. You have where your cloud data sits. So for our audience, if you think about this, the office needs an internet connection, and we always recommend having two. And then depending on the size of your company, we can do some neat things on the back end so that you can use both of them at once so that it performs faster. You have those remote employees who, before COVID, if you didn't have great internet in your home, well, that was kind of okay. It wasn't really necessary. But in the environment that we are in today, that's caused a lot of people to move. Like, I can't live out in the middle of the country anymore because I don't have an internet option that allows me to do my job. And connecting to that data center as well. You mentioned having your own computer, and for the people viewing this, the average architecture laptop is 3 times more expensive than the average business laptop because of the processing and speed necessary to make it perform at acceptable levels. And then when you look at that data center, having a direct connection to that data center as well, so that all of that works seamlessly and not just works, but performs. And I think that's the key for people to look at, that when you are talking about technology for any industry, but architecture is a great way to highlight it, is this is a smart place to strategically invest. And I frame it that way. There was this great commercial several years ago. I believe it was for a credit card company, and was King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. And one of the King Arthur stood up and said, "We're being invaded. What are we going to do?" And Sir Galahad stands up and says, "Sir, we've collected all the gold in the castle, and we're going to melt it into a giant ball, put it on a catabelt, and throw it at our enemies." And King Arthur says, "Are you really suggesting that we simply throw money at the problem?" And that's not what we're saying at all. But as you just said, for an architecture project, there's always a way to get it done. It's probably going to look a little different than initially envisioned. And if you're okay with that, then we can get it done in the time frame that you want and within the budget that you want. And those are things that have to be a little dynamic. They have to be a little fluid. And again, I know your organization does this. When you're originally planning out a project with a client, it's really talking about, well, what are these things that could trip us up? I always like to tell people, I've been doing this for so long. I've seen just about every pitch you can throw at me. Can you sneak a fastball by me from time to time? Yeah, absolutely you can. But I've seen the majority of the problems, and I can anticipate how to bypass them. And because of that, it makes you more efficient. And because you're more efficient, you better serve your client. So I love those points that you brought up. So there's a couple of tech specific items to your industry. You mentioned Revit. Um, why don't you share a little bit with us about those, and how the 800-pound gorilla that has 70% of the marketplace. And so I'm curious, is it 70% is a good thing or a bad thing? What are your feelings about some of the technology tools that are very pervasive in architecture?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. So the gorilla you're speaking of is Autodesk,
Yeah.
and they for a long, long time everybody used AutoCAD. There are other competitors, but AutoCAD has been very dominant. But then that has switched over into Revit, which most architecture firms are using for 3D modeling and building information modeling. We call it BIM. And so we have so that's huge, but also developing graphics and renderings for presentation is really, really critical. And we use a number of different programs for that. Sometimes we're using SketchUp, sometimes Rhino, sometimes Lumion, but we need a lot of horsepower in terms of our graphics cards and machines that we're using. But sometimes we're not just rendering still frames to be like like a photorealistic image. We're doing animations, right? So that's a video, a real-time video, or we might be using VR, virtual reality technology, to do real live walkthroughs of our spaces. And so anything that can help our clients visualize. I feel like our industry is still behind the video gaming industry as far as generating
Well,
graphics
everybody is. Don't feel
like it
bad.
should. Yeah, I wish we could incorporate more of that. It's getting there, though. We're getting there. And so, yeah, everyone is using a very similar platform. Even our engineers are using it to say model the structural trusses and the beams, while our mechanical engineers are modeling the ductwork, and our electrical engineers are modeling the light switches and the light fixtures, and the right. So we have full multi-model integration. But then we take that to the next level where, sustainability is really important. And so we're running energy load calculations.
Ah,
We're
nice.
looking at the building envelope as a whole and the systems for efficiencies, for solar, for heat gain, for whatever it is, studying the climate and the needs of where that, facility is located. So building information modeling really gives you kind of every piece of information you could need about this building when it is built. And you can take it as far as you want to and define the detail as far as you want to in terms of the materials. And, it's pretty much everything. So we have to figure out the level to how detailed you want to create a building in 3 dimensions, and what's needed and what's the best for your client. And when we're doing that, like I mentioned before, our clients have very specific deadlines. A school has to open on time. We can't miss the I don't know, Christmas service at church, right? Like
Sure.
you just can't. Our buildings have to open on time. The residential healthcare, you cannot miss a beat. So on our projects, we cannot miss a beat. So our technology cannot miss a beat, right? Like so our technology directly serves our clients in that sense. So we rely on having the reliability of our technology, and in that building information modeling, as I mentioned before, a lot of it has become cloud-based so that we can be working real time with many others. So we worked on, for example, the MGM Grand National Harbor
Ooh.
building outside of DC and National Harbor, and there were over 40 different companies working, on this 3D model. We worked with HKS Architects and with Smith Group. They were, the two main architects. We were the third name architect. But having that, to that scale, billions of dollars, over a billion, or over 1 million square feet, right? Our system needs to function on projects of that scale. They also need to function on projects that are like one office in one building for a very small nonprofit, but that office is going to make all the difference in the world to them. So that kind of flex in scale is really important too. And our workstations have to accommodate that. The connections have to accommodate that. It all has to come together. Like I said, we can't miss a beat.
So I want to talk about two words that I heard come out of what you just shared, which are collaboration and logistics. So let's put National Harbor aside for a moment, though I'd love to just chat with you about that. I think that facility is gorgeous. Um, let's talk about a typical account that you're working on. As you mentioned, maybe it's a single faith-based facility, So in the grand scheme of things, a much smaller, less sophisticated project. There's still so many logistical matters, and you're collaborating with 5, 10, because it's not just you and the customer. It's permitting, it's construction, it's supplies, it's high voltage, it's low voltage. I mean, you could name them better than I can. So, what are the tools that you're using from a technology standpoint to really collaborate?
Um, we do use other software in terms of marking things up and kind of like design charrettes and ways to communicate changes or ideas or thoughts. So Bluebeam is one of those that we
Okay.
use a lot to kind of mark up our drawings, and that's really collaborative. We also are just like taking snapshots of our screens and sketching on things constantly virtually. That's probably been the biggest challenge. We are used to sharing ideas very fluidly on a piece of trace paper in the office and up on a board or whatever. So having, capabilities to do that virtually, that's been a little bit challenging for architects to like adjust to how do we sketch on our screen. But there are a lot of different tools that people have been using just to kind of basically draw virtually on iPads and whatnot. We also use a program called Newforma, which allows us to, and actually we did need a separate server for that. It's a large program. You guys helped us set that up. Allows us to track and log all communication. So all of the emails for every project get filed. And so anyone from our team can quickly access any emails that are related to that project. Also, it's a great way to document during construction, all submittals and change orders and requests for information. And that is all tracked in that program. It's a really great team collaborative database. And
And that's internal and external. Yeah, that's not just your company, but you can do that with other vendors and the client. And
yes, another thing we do all the time are share very large files. So how do you send a very large file? That helps with our file transfer and exchange, or you can set up similar to like a Dropbox. You could set up a file exchange for a
Mhm.
large group, hundreds of photos we might need to share with someone or whatnot. Also for large proposals that we do, the graphics are really important, and we use Adobe Creative Suite for a lot of different things for our visual marketing materials and whatnot. So um, Those are probably the main ones we use a lot.
Love it. So let's put on your blue sky hat, your creative hat, your forward thinking hat for this last segment here. And where do you think the architecture world is going from a technology perspective? Like, what do you think is the next big thing that is really going to help you support your clients?
Yeah, yeah. One of the things that's being talked about a lot in our industry, and it has been for a while, is resiliency, resilient architecture.
Oh,
Um,
okay. Interesting.
yeah, so sustainability is one thing where we're designing, buildings that are sustainable, that are energy efficient, using sustainable materials that are, as part of our practice of being stewards for the environment. But resiliency is something that kind of takes it one step further in terms of protecting from larger natural disasters, and designing to prevent building failure in much more severe weather conditions, because we see that happening around the world. How we can be designing facilities that can withstand huge storms and tsunamis, and obviously we design for those things already, but increasing the standard for that is going to be really important for us moving forward. But also the attention to renewable resources is critical, and it's something that the architecture industry has been doing for a long time, for many years. But that it's getting even more important that we're using renewable building materials on a lot of our buildings consume, I don't know the exact statistic, but the most amount of energy, more than anything else, right, in the
Sure.
in the world, on the planet, and how we can be working together to reduce that. And also sustainable communities, sustainable community design, having networks of buildings working together to foster better and more renewable energy sources, and driving healthier design. Well design is something that's a part of that. It's huge in our industry now, just designing healthy buildings that foster health and wellness with natural daylighting, with views, with the lighting that we're using, with the air quality, with individual comfort and controls for each person and their special needs. Buildings that are accessible and universally designed for all, to accommodate everyone that might have a huge wide variety of disabilities or special needs. So there's a lot that I'm talking about that is like buildings needing to withstand longer, and
Mhm.
buildings that also need to be customized to meet or flex the needs of a large diverse group of people, and buildings that need to work together in a community system a lot better. I would, if I could kind of summarize those three ideas, it's really, really important.
I absolutely love it. Well, Krista, this has been a fantastic conversation. I'm exceptionally grateful for your time,
Yeah, thank you.
effort, and energy today. For our viewing audience, if you would like to work with Walden or contact Krista, we will make sure the contact information is available in the show notes. You can always go to our website as well, which is www.getadvantage.com. And we will be more than happy to personally introduce you to Krista and her fantastic team. And if you enjoyed this, boy, are you in for a treat, because coming up in the next 2 months, we have Michael Weinsek, one of the principals of Weinsek and Associates, to continue our architecture focus series. And in December, we will be interviewing David Powell from the Federal Business Council and Gloria Larkin, the president of TargetGov.com. And we're going to have a panel discussion with them about working in the government contracting world. So for Krista Kerrigan with Waldon Studios, I am Mike Sheila with Advantage Industries, and thank you all for tuning in today.